WWE Smackdown starts off with Cody Rhodes versus Solo Sikoa for the WWE Undisputed Championship match. This was in a steel cage. This was absolutely a really good match. I really enjoyed it. This was a great way to start off with Smackdown moving over to the USA Network. Started off with Solo dominating the beginning portion of the match. Early on, Cody Rhodes was bleeding. He wasn't bleeding too much, but he was bleeding a little bit. But then Cody starts getting the momentum. It was a very cool spot where Solo, I think, tried to do like a power bomb, but then Cody ends up hanging on to like the steel cage and then ends up doing a Cody cutter off the steel cage. That was very sick. Later in the match, we had another spot where Solo ends up doing a suplex off of the not the top of the steel cage, but near the top of the steel cage onto Cody Rhodes. Um, then later in the match, it was another spot where Cody got up all the way towards the top of the steel cage, and he ends up doing a crossbody off the top of the steel cage onto Solo Sikoa, goes for the pin, but Solo then eventually ends up kicking out. But we end up getting towards the end. Solo tries to go for a Samoan spike, but Cody ends up reversing it into a crossroads, and then Cody ends up retaining the WWE Undisputed Championship. But then after the match, the Bloodline comes out. Tama Tonga, Jacob Fatu, and Tonga Lore are all surrounding the ring. They end up climbing up the cage and go inside and ends up attacking Cody Rhodes. They're constantly attacking Cody Rhodes. Jacob Fatu was he was at the top of the steel cage, was about to jump off of it, but then Roman Reigns ends up making his return. He comes out, get a crazy pop, comes in the ring, ends up closing the cage, and ends up taking out the Bloodline. He was about to go for a spear on he was about to go for a spear on Solo Sikoa, but then Jacob Fatu ends up saving Solo Sikoa. But then the steel cage is still open, and Roman starts he starts telling Jacob to come in the ring. He wants to fight Jacob Fatu. The crowd is getting excited. I'm getting excited because I'm like, there's no way they're about to actually do this. Jacob Fatu actually gets in the ring, but then Solo Sikoa ends up pulling Jacob Fatu out of the ring. Then out of nowhere, the Tonga brothers ends up attacking Roman Reigns, but then Cody ends up recovering and ends up helping out Roman Reigns, and they both have a little stare down. This was a really good segment. I love what they did here. This, of course, ended up building up towards the main event that we all know what happened, but this was great. It's a really amazing segment. This was really great, and I love that Roman Reigns is back. This was an overall amazing segment. This was a great way to start off the first episode on the USA Network. After the match, we end up getting a match between Michin versus Piper Niven to set up the match from last week, where I think Chelsea Green ended up beating Michin via help from Piper Niven. This was a quick match. Michin ends up actually beating Piper Niven, which was very shocking. She beat her very quickly as well. But after the match, Chelsea Green, Piper Niven ended up attacking Michin, so this is going to continue the rivalry. Of course, she's going to need some help. I don't know who's going to help her because originally Bayley and Michin were kind of going after Nia Jax. But now it seems like after tonight's episode, Bayley won't really be involved. She's going to be too busy with Nia, and Michin's going to be busy with Chelsea. So I don't know who's going to help Chelsea Green, but I'm interested in Survivor because Michin is one of the most underrated women on the women's roster in general. And Chelsea Green, I love Chelsea Green, and Piper Niven also is very underrated as well. So I love the feud. I think the feud can be really good if booked properly. Now after this, we end up getting A-Town Down Under versus Kevin Owens and a mystery partner. Kevin Owens had to find a partner, and his partner ended up coming out and ended up being a jobber, Ricky. We was all confused. He ends up coming out, but they end up tricking the crowd because it looked like Ricky was actually going to wrestle, but then a lady ends up coming telling Kevin Owens that his partner his partner came last minute. We all knew who his partner was going to be, but this was an overall funny segment. Kevin Owens ends up, being happy, of course, that Randy came. He ends up hitting the stunner on Ricky. I think he ended up calling him Reggie, too, as well, before he did the stunner. Then Randy Orton comes out, and then they have the match. Randy Orton and KO, of course, ends up winning the match. This was a funny segment. I just wish that, I don't know why, but I actually got excited that Ricky was going to actually fight, because I'm typically not the biggest fan of the mystery thing because it's always the most predictable person. I already knew it was going to be Randy Orton, but the way they did it was funny, so I let it slide. But overall, this match only happened because they just needed Kevin Owens and Randy to be on the show. That's really why this match happened, because this match didn't need to happen because this didn't further any storyline. This didn't add to the Austin Theory Grayson Waller thing. And plus, KO already beat them in a triple threat match, so it's really no need to have the match, but this was just to have Randy Orton and KO on the show, though. After this, we end up getting a Nia Jax promo. Actually, before that, um, Nick Aldis was getting interviewed by Jackie Redman, if I'm not mistaken, and basically he ends up announcing that Solo wants a match between Roman and Cody, between him and Jacob Fatu at Bad Blood, and basically we all know what ended up happening. But the fact that this was even a thing or even in consideration is just amazing because I never thought Roman Reigns would actually be at Bad Blood. I know a lot of people was speculating he could be at Bad Blood, but I just never thought it would be possible. But the fact that it was actually a possibility is insane. But afterwards, we end up getting Nia Jax. She cuts a promo. She basically talks about, how dominant she is and that she's going to have a title match at Bad Blood. Then Bayley ends up coming out and basically ends up saying that she wants a rematch between her and Nia. Nia ends up, basically end up saying that Bayley doesn't really deserve a shot. She ends up going down Bayley's past, mentioning damage control, mentioning how that she doesn't need a group in order to win matches. Bayley ends up mentioning how she didn't need, damage control to become WWE champion, and then she ends up mentioning that she doesn't need a group either, but then she starts alluding to Tiffany Stratton because she hangs around Tiffany. Then what is that? Because technically Nia Jax and Tiffany is technically a group because a group is two or more people in my opinion. But then she ends up mentioning how without Tiffany that she wouldn't be women's champion. Tiffany then comes out and ends up saying, try to defend Nia Jax, ends up just saying that Bayley is jealous of her, jealous of them. Then Bayley ends up mentioning last week's victory and ends up mentioning, she ends up mentioning last week's victory. Tiffany gets frustrated and starts lashing out a bit, ends up saying that it was all Nia Jax's fault. Nia and Tiffany have a little moment where Nia, felt offended, looked like they was about to have a back and forth, but then Nia ends up calming herself down and ends up calming herself down. Then Nia was I forgot. Nia was saying something about I think bad blood or something. Oh, she was alluding to beating up Bayley. That's what it was. She was alluding to beating up Bayley, but then Naomi ends up coming out and ends up, to protect Bayley. But also she comes out and said that she wants to be champion as well and that she wants to go after the women's title. Then Nia Jax ends up making a suggestion that they should have a tag match to decide who will be the one to face her at Bad Blood, and she ends up making a stipulation that whoever gets pinned in the match between Bayley and Nia has to leave SmackDown. So that's going to be very interesting to see how this match plays out as well. It's going to be very interesting how this match plays out because I'm assuming that Bayley and Naomi are going to win and they're probably going to make it a triple threat. But I also think there's going to be some type of shenanigans in that match as well due to what ended up happening later in the show. But afterwards, we end up getting another banger between Carmelo Hayes and Andrade. This is the fifth match of the series. It was tied 2-2. Andrade does end up picking up the victory as I predicted. Makes sense. I'm not mad at it. Melo is probably going to win the sixth match and then the seventh match. Could it be on Bad Blood? Hey, I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't hate it if it was on Bad Blood. But this was another banger match. After the match, though, we end up getting LA Knight. He ends up coming out, basically making an announcement that Andrade is now the number one contender and that him and Andrade will face next week on SmackDown. That should be an absolute banger of a match. We all know that LA Knight is winning, but the match should be great nonetheless. After this segment, we end up getting a Bianca Belair, Jade Cargill, Nia Jax, and Tiffany Stratton segment. And Nia Jax ends up interrupting their little interview and ends up, mentioning Naomi. And she ends up talking trash to Jade and Bianca, talking about how she beat them and how she runs SmackDown. Then Jade and Bianca gave each other that look and end up saying bet. So it looks like they're going to interfere in next week's match in a tag match, which I'm assuming is going to happen. Now, I don't know how they're going to do this because typically when baby faces interfere, they only interfere when a heel interferes. So I don't know how this match is going to play out, but it looks like they're going to be involved some way with Nia and Tiffany because they're both tag champs. So I don't see them going after the singles title, but they're going to be involved some way because they're definitely planting the seeds of them going after Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton after that segment. So interested to see how that plays out. Now we get to main event. We get Roman Reigns. He ends up cutting a promo. Starts off with him. Nick Aldis was on the microphone. But then Roman ends up pulling his hand out like he typically does, like he did with Paul Heyman. Pulls his hand out. Nick Aldis ends up giving him the contract instead. Roman Reigns ends up doing it again. And then Nick Aldis finally gives him the microphone. Roman Reigns gets on the mic and ends up saying that some things change, but not me. ends up saying that this is family business. I don't need Nick Aldis. I don't need no contract, and I don't need the help of Cody Rhodes. Love that, he still doesn't like Cody Rhodes. That is great because it wouldn't make sense for Roman all of a sudden to start liking Cody Rhodes. Then he ends up saying that whether he has the Ulafala or not, he is still the tribal chief, and that not only is he the original, but he is the only tribal chief, which is absolute facts. Then he ends up alluding to that this is still his ring, still his company, that he still run things in the WWE. But then Cody Rhodes ends up coming out. Cody Rhodes comes out and ends up saying that all the things that he said was his, that it was his at one point, but it hasn't been his since WrestleMania. Both wrestlers are staring each other down. Then Cody and Roman both end up dropping their microphones. It looks like they was about to brawl, but then Solo Sikoa ends up interrupting. He ends up coming out. It's him and Jacob Fatu. He's distracting Cody and Roman, and then the bloodline, well, the Tonga brothers, ends up attacking Cody and Roman, but they end up failing because they both end up overpowering them, end up taking them both out. Then Roman ends up going after the contract. He looks at it and ends up signing the contract, but then Cody ends up looking at Roman and he ends up pulling his hand out the same way Roman typically pulls his hand out for a microphone. He ends up pulling his hand out, and then Roman gives him the contract, even though Roman didn't want to do it, but he does, and Cody signs the contract. So at Bad Blood, it is official that we have Solo Sikoa, Jacob Fatu versus Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, and I'm assuming that that's definitely main eventing. This is great. This was a great episode of Raw. This was amazing. I can't wait to see what happens at Bad Blood. We all know how it's going to end, but I'm just curious to see what the story they're going to tell afterwards. They're definitely going to play the story of two enemies having to work together, similar to what they did with Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins for a bit around basically last year in 2023. They did the same thing, especially towards War Games, if I'm not mistaken. They did the same thing. I may be wrong, but they did the same thing. So I love what they did here. This was an amazing episode of SmackDown. Plus, this gives Cody something of significance to do at War Games. Not at War Games, at Bad Blood. Because none of us wanted to see Solo and Cody Rhodes. Even though I'm a bigger Solo fan than most, I didn't want to see that match. And then I didn't want to see another Kevin Owens match as well, because Kevin Owens turning heel does not make that match more entertaining, because he was just going to lose either way. So this is actually something that actually can progress. I'm excited for what's going to happen at Bad Blood, but you guys let me know your opinions down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. But yeah, that's it.